Yo, what up, music fam? This is Walt, and you are listening to the Success with Music podcast. And again, this is Walt, and we're going to get started on our show in just a quick second. We're going to have a regular episode talking about some things that will help you get better as a musician. But at the time that this podcast is being released, there are a lot of crazy things happening in the world that we live in. And of course, I'm speaking about the coronavirus and what it's been doing to the globe, to travel, to commerce. And we actually broadcast from the United States, if you didn't know. And specifically, I'm based in the state of Ohio. And it just so happens that our government officials have come down with some very aggressive measures to curb the spread of infections. And so restaurants are now closed, bars are closed, grocery stores have reduced hours here where we are, schools are closed. It's a major thing. So I once heard a story or a kind of analogy, if you will, of a boat being out in the ocean. I don't know how many gallons of water there are out in the ocean, but there's a lot. Millions, trillions, I have zero idea. But the point being is that if you're on a boat, if you're in a vessel out on the sea and the waves are just kind of coming at you and things are kind of choppy, it's incredibly unnerving. The number one thing that has to happen in that really dangerous environment, the number one thing is the boat cannot take on water. That's the number one thing. If that boat can manage to just keep water out of the hull, then it's okay. It's in good shape. So my personal belief with all of the craziness that's happening in the world and all of the unprecedented measures that are being taken globally, as an individual, you're out there and you're just a small boat maybe in this huge sea, and you may not feel like you have a lot of power. My belief is that peace in one's heart specifically comes by way of having something inside of your heart to keep the water out. I believe that thing or that person is Jesus Christ. So with all the craziness in the world and all the turmoil, my encouragement to you is to think about the state of your heart. If fear has flooded into there, maybe you need something to displace that fear. And I think when crazy things like this happen in the world, it usually causes me anyways to really contemplate what is really important. Systems of this world have been ground to a halt, well, at least where I am. I love music, man. I love having fun and doing all the great things of like making songs and being creative. But there are some greater things, afoot in the world. And again, I believe that for you as an individual to have that peace, really contemplating where you stand with respect to God specifically, it's a valid question. All right. So today is not meant to be a sermon or preachy, but if I'm going to help you in the best way, this is it. But having said that, man, we are going to try to take your mind off of this craziness and have a little fun today. All right. So let's go ahead and get to this episode.
Coming up on today's swim episode.
Please resist the urge to mindlessly use bass-related plugins. So there are all kinds of plugins, paid, freemium plugins, where they talk about giving you like out-of-this-world bass. They have these presets, and you're out there like...
This is Swim. Success with Music.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Walt. You are listening to the podcast Success with Music. Again, that's Success with Music. We call it SWIM for short, SWM. Hey, I appreciate you listening to the podcast today. Again, my name is Walt. I am your host, your music coach, and this is a podcast for singers, songwriters, beat makers, music students. We are always about the music life. And again, I appreciate you guys listening to the show, especially if you happen to be new to the show. We've been promoting the show to get it out to more people. We believe that we offer really good and insightful things that you can use like right away to help you get better at the craft of creating music. So if you could, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast right now. We do drop content on a semi-regular basis. And when we do, we want you to be informed about the knowledge that will help you get better as a songwriter and producer and a creator. So yeah, we're on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcasts, and of course, we encourage you to visit our homepage, which is successwithmusic.com, successwithmusic.com. Currently, we have a survey up, so we would love for you to go there and just click one button to weigh in on what's most important to you as a musician. So again, that's successwithmusic.com. All right, so today I want to talk about something that will help you in your production, especially if you're using a digital audio workstation. I guess some of these tips will be helpful if you're using a traditional setup with outboard gear, like physical gear. But the topic here is dealing with the low end, dealing with bass. So it's no secret that most modern genres of music seem to really push on the low end to create a robust, full thump when you're listening, right? So you've heard those tracks, especially like dance tracks. You really want to hear that low end. Some people say you want to feel it, not just hear it. And so many people who are recording in a home setup or in a small studio, we're chasing that mythical low end, that rich low end sound. And sometimes it's hard to achieve. So today I want to offer a few tips that will help you get a fuller, stronger, thick low end. All right, so let's get to these tips. All right, so I have 10 tips that will help you get a much fuller, thicker, richer bass experience in your song. Again, this is not just one genre of music, man. It's all. If you're doing cinematic music, if you have those kettle drums, you want those things to bang. If you're doing, R&B or country, you want the kick drum to really hit you in the chest, right? So we're going to go through these tips. So when you are trying to create that thick, rich punch for the bottom end of your track, I highly recommend you synchronize your bass instrument, your bass guitar, your bass synth with your kick drum. What I mean by that is when your kick drum sounds, some of your notes in the bass should overlap in terms of timing. So in other words, there should be a rhythmic overlap between your kick drum and your bass instrument. Again, a synth or an actual guitar. When these two are operating together, it allows for a more perceived punch. Having these things separate, they can still do the job in terms of providing a low end, but is not as powerful. So let me give you two audio examples. The first one will be a situation where the bass is not in sync with the kick drum. Take a listen. Now, in an instance where they're aligned or there's overlap in certain patterns within the rhythm, you get a totally different experience. Check this out. So again, that's just an example of how you can make those two align. So this doesn't mean that your kick drum and your bass instrument, they have to be lockstep in every situation, but having some purposeful overlap between the two rhythmically will give you a lot more punch. All right, let's go on to the next tip. I highly recommend that you cut your EQ at 20 hertz, way down there at the low end. Get your graphic EQ up and create a node or a point at the 20 hertz area of your EQ, and that should be to the far left. Right there, you should cut everything that comes after the 20 hertz. So meaning 20 hertz, 19, 17, all the way to that side, cut that severely. And if you can in your EQ, turn the Q up just a bit more to make that reduction more drastic. Why am I saying this? That low end part of the frequency does your mix absolutely no good. That 20 and below hertz area is beyond or outside of our threshold of hearing. So keeping it in the mix actually takes up sound energy, inaudible sound energy, but energy nonetheless. And what it does, in my opinion, is it robs your overall track of loudness, because those frequencies that are happening at the 20 hertz level and below, they are affecting your overall volume level. Meaning, ideally, we would like to get up to about 0 dB on our overall mix. But if a part of that whole collection of sound is being given to this phantom sound, this 20 and below hertz energy, I believe it robs your song of thump. If your kicks and your low ends and your bass, if they're banging really hard, they're being robbed by having that energy present beyond the 20 hertz threshold. And if you want any insight on making your overall mix a lot louder, we've covered that back in episodes 47, 48, and 49, how to make your music louder. But again, we're talking about the bass here, so again, you can check that out at a different time. Episodes 47, 48, and 49. Oh, and one more thing. I will put a graphic up on this episode's page, and that way you can see a picture of what it looks like to cut that EQ right at that 20 hertz mark. And this is episode 59, by the way. So if you go to our website, successwithmusic.com, click on the podcasts area in the menu, you can navigate to episode 59. All right, let's keep going. So whenever we're trying to get that thick bass, sorry, I'm putting the two C's on the thick, we have a tendency to grab the bass knob and turn it up. We have a tendency to go to the EQ and find everything on the left side of the EQ and just crank it. I'm going to encourage you to stay away from just boosting things and boosting gain. On the other side of it, I would rather you actually reduce volume on other instrumentation. So on our first tip, we talked about having the bass and the kick sound together. So let's say you have track number 1, kick drum. Track number 2, some type of bass instrument. Track number 3 and beyond, you have synths and percussion and pianos and things like that. Why not reduce the volume of those other instruments collectively, so by default, the kick and the bass come out much clearer and louder and with more power, as opposed to going straight for the kick drum and the bass instrument and cranking up the EQ on the low end or some type of bass related knob for those things. Reduce the volume of the other instruments, and relatively speaking, your low end will bang a lot harder. So let's talk about the EQ though. So I know that some of you may still need to boost your bass in certain instances. You may say, hey, you know what, Walt, I'm all for increasing the volume, but it still doesn't have that thick, robust thump to it. So you may want to play around with the EQ on your low end here or there. That's totally fine. Here's the thing though. Do it in small increments. Again, I repeat, if you're doing any boosting with an EQ, do it in small increments. I'm talking about 1 decibel. 2 decibels, 3 decibels. And 3 is actually a lot. So if you're down there on the low end and let's say you're playing with, I don't know, somewhere near the 50 hertz frequency, you don't need to yank that 50 hertz frequency node or little dot up like 8 decibels. That's a lot. And a lot of times we get in trouble because when we're using our plugins, we are looking at it visually. We're like, oh, well, I moved it up kind of halfway the screen. I guess maybe the bass is where